Hello and welcome to Collector Showcase. My name is Mark Zimmerman and we're at the Avalon movie theater today, and we're going to show a friend of mine's private collection of movie props and masks that are on display here at the Avalon. And I'd like you to meet Eric Levin.
Hi, Mark.
And how did you start collecting the movie props and masks?
Well, I've collected movie memorabilia in the past, but I thought since we had an ideal place to display the stuff that we should enhance the lobby of the theater by having a display. So I envisioned something like this, which we call the prop shop. To make it more unusual, I thought we should have props that were actually used in the movies instead of just commonplace, common movie material.
Rather than regular posters and lobbies.
Right.
So these were actually props used in the movies. Like this first one here is a mask, an ugly-looking woman here. What's that from?
That was used in Frankenstein's Daughter, which was a 1958 B film, sort of a horror film. The mask is by a man named Harry Thomas, who did a lot of the makeup for films of that type during the 50s and 60s, the low-budget horror and sci-fi films.
Now, it really looks mummified there.
Yeah, it's a pretty horrifying mask. Unfortunately, the way they shot it in the film, it was absolutely laughable. It was worn by a stuntman named Whitey Hughes, who was dressed in a bikini. And he became the Bikini Monster, and it was just ridiculous.
Will you look at that? Hold it!
But as you can see from looking at it, the mask in itself is pretty frightening. Unfortunately, they didn't take the time to shoot it properly.
How did you acquire that mask?
This we acquired with some other props from a man named Clark Wilkinson, who had a movie museum in Baraboo. He had been collecting for 80 or 100 years, something like that. And he used to take people into his basement, and he was a regular tourist attraction there. So I remember that from when I was 15 or so, going to his house and seeing these props. And he decided to sell what he had, and we picked up a lot of that stuff.
How hard is it to really get something like that in?
Well, the masks especially, anything made out of latex is very fragile, very perishable, because it's got a life of 30, maybe 40 years at best, and then it just it melts, or it becomes very rigid, and the piece is no longer, any good. It starts crumbling. So the latex pieces, the masks, are very hard to come by, and this one is already 32 years old, so it's getting up there in age.
Yeah. What's this next one? It looks like a giant insect.
Well, that's a model that was used in the 1957 film, The Deadly Mantis, and that is a definitely more, that's a sturdier prop. That's made out of wood and clay and wire. That'll certainly hold up better than the rubber pieces. That was used in one of the flying scenes in the film.
So it was just it's more like a model rather than something where it actually moved in the movie. It was...
Right, this
is solid.
Right, it had a wing that was somehow optically they made the wings appear to be fluttering. And but basically it was just lowered on wires and moved in that way. It's not a fully articulated kind of a thing the way they would approach it now. It's more of a primitive kind of a biological model.
You wouldn't happen to know if, like in the new King Kong, they've made a giant-sized King Kong. Did they make a giant-sized Deadly Mantis, or was
For that film?
For that film, or did they just
No, I don't believe
use
so.
a
I
small
think they
model?
were just all miniature sets.
Like the old
scaled
King
down.
Kong and
Right,
stuff.
right. Of course, it's it's interesting to point out that King Kong was actually 18 inches tall.
Yeah, the original, yeah.
Even
Didn't Clark Wilkinson have that originally?
No, he claimed to have that, and I saw that model. It didn't appear to be a King Kong model. But apparently he sold that to a Muppets executive as the original King Kong.
Because I remember a Green Sheet article about 12, 15 years ago that had an article
Right.
about him with the King Kong model,
Right.
saying that that was the original.
It may have been, but it didn't. I remember seeing it 10 or 12 years ago, and it didn't look like the original Kong. It looked like Mighty Joe Young. But that model, again, was about 18 inches tall. And at that time, he had it under a bell jar, a glass jar to preserve it, and it was falling apart at that time, which is kind of sad.
Yeah. What are these hands here?
These arms were worn by William Shatner in an Outer Limits episode called Cold Hands, Warm Heart.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, which was kind of a minor episode, but it was, he's certainly a notable actor. These are made basically of foam rubber, and they're fragile. Those are from 1964, and those, again, won't last forever.
I can see on the side here that there's a zipper
Right.
up and down the whole thing. You had to zip it up
Right.
after you put the gloves on.
Right. That would have been the only way to get those over his arms, I would think.
Yeah.
So then the zipper was covered with makeup. It was hidden very well, I'm sure.
Okay, and in this case here, we have a couple more hands. So what are these? These are from Outer Limits
These
too?
are also Outer Limits hands, and again, those are foam, latex foam. Those were possibly worn by Robert Duvall in an episode called The Chameleon. That's also 1964.
And the mask that's behind there, what is that from?
That's a life cast, a life mask of Leonard Nimoy that was used by Don Post Studios to produce Mr. Spock mask
Oh.
about 10 years ago.
Oh yeah, that does look like Mr. Spock.
Yeah.
Okay, and here's a bug-eyed guy. What's this from?
Yeah, that's the classic bug-eyed alien, and that's a bit of a corny makeup that again was by Harry Thomas for the 1954 film Killers from Space, which starred Peter Graves, although he didn't have to wear the eyes. He was a human in the film.
That's the one with they had a bunch of bugs and stuff. He just looked at it and it was like rear projection screen
Yeah, it was a
behind
rear
it.
projection of giant lizards and
grasshoppers.
he'd do this terrible broad stage reaction to these huge insects. That was kind of a laughable scene in the movie.
Must be insane. This is ridiculous.
You cannot find your way in or out of this cavern.
What are you doing here?
We are breeding our, shall I say, armies.
Those carnivorous insects and animals? What have you done to them?
Their growth is due to a change in their genes. With your next nuclear test, these animals will multiply at a rate beyond imagination. When the time comes, we will unleash them. They will spread to every continent and devour every living thing on the surface of the earth. You will remember nothing you have seen or heard here. Nothing but my orders, which you will obey.
Yes.
You will obtain the data and bring it to the stone near the place where your plane was wrecked.
To the stone.
What have you seen or heard here? What have you seen or heard here?
Nothing.
The aliens, again, Harry Thomas told me that he was really disappointed with that film, especially because they wouldn't give him enough time to make the eyes effective. These were basically just cut from the bottom of egg trays that you find in refrigerators. They're plastic spheres that he cut out and
I thought maybe they were
painted.
ping pong balls. Or
No,
something.
they weren't ping pong balls. They wanted him to use ping pong balls, but he wouldn't do that. He was very offended at the suggestion of using ping pong balls. But he came up with his own idea, and apparently at the time that was pretty innovative.
And this one looks like another Harry Thomas mask.
Yeah, that's another full head mask by Harry. And that's a cellar mutant from a film that starred John Carradine, The Unearthly, which is 1957. And he appeared very briefly in a closing scene of the film. Again, unfortunately, Harry went through hours and hours of work, and they didn't put in any effort, to show his work in a good light. They just, it's very, very difficult to see the mask in the finished film.
I see they got a shot of the monster in the lobby card there, the title card.
Yeah, the mask appears on the bottom of that lobby card. That's the title, called the title card for the film. And that's about the clearest view anyone had of the mask at the time.
Did they actually use real hair on these, or?
Yeah, he used real hair. He never used crepe hair, which he thinks looks artificial.
Yeah,
So
because this
it
one is
real
really,
hair.
really looks like, a couple of old guys that I know.
It probably is.
Yeah, with the beard. And
Yeah.
the only thing is, he could use go to the dentist. And you got a couple of new things for the movie that was shot here locally.
Yeah, we
It's,
do.
one thing down here is it says Daleville Bank. That was from
Right,
the Dillinger shoot, right?
right. That was a safe door from one of the banks, probably a safe door that was blown off with dynamite or something. I don't know. We'll find out when the film is aired.
Yeah, it's supposed to be airing in like February, I think. And we also have another thing here. It's the what is that?
Well, that's the lobby display for the film Manhattan Melodrama, which was used in the Biograph Theater. And in fact, that was the movie that was playing, the last movie that Dillinger ever saw at the Biograph. When he came out of the theater, the FBI men shot him down without really giving him a chance to surrender. It was, so this is a fairly good recreation of what a lobby display might have looked like in 1934. Very elaborate. They're just not, doing things that way anymore.
Yeah, I remember I used to have like these big giant billboard type boards, posters on wood.
Right.
For When Worlds Collide, I had a couple of those, and they
Right.
were like 8 feet tall, and
Yeah.
I used to just nail them right to the front of the theaters back
That's
then.
right. Yeah, we do have, as you'll see later, a piece similar to that. It's the face of Harold Lloyd that was used as a marquee display. These things were very elaborate back then. Promotional material was very, a lot of money was put into that. Now you'll see cardboard, what are called standees in lobbies, but they're not half as impressive as what, used to be used in theater lobbies for advertising.
And getting over to some of these other things, you mentioned the Harold Lloyd, and we'll look at that again. And these other ones up here on the wall, you've got like, what is that, Will Rogers and Katharine Hepburn. Are those old originals, or?
Yeah, those are what you might call posterized designs for, again, lobby film promotion. I think those were all from 1934.
1934.
They might look like pop art from the 60s.
Yeah, they do kind of, they're colorful,
right.
Orange and
fluorescent.
pink hair and
Yeah.
stuff like that. That's why I thought it wasn't an original, maybe.
That's what I thought at first. These, again, were in Clark Wilkinson's basement, but
Yeah.
they were all made in the early 30s, and really very striking material for promoting films at the time.
And I noticed you got Cagney and Harlow and
Cagney, Jean Harlow, Clark Gable.
who's that, Wheeler and Woolsey?
Wheeler and Woolsey.
A couple more masks you've got over the vending stand. Could you tell us about some of those?
We have another Harry Thomas mask, actually one that he created for us last year. That's a new creation. He made that especially for the Avalon. The mask to the right of that is from the Island of Dr. Moreau. It wasn't actually used in the film, but it's from the original mold.
Is that from the Burt Lancaster one?
Right, 1977, I believe.
And then we also have this W.C. Fields and Baby Leroy poster. What's that?
Old-fashioned way.
Yeah, the old-fashioned way.
That, again, is a posterized design for a specific film. The Old-Fashioned Way was in 1934. So that's, that's a custom-made thing that would have been done by a local sign shop for the theater.
That's like the old boards that they used to put up above the marquee and
Right.
stuff.
Right.
It was local people that did those.
Right,
yeah.
local sign shop that was given probably a silk screen process where those were farmed out to the local sign shops, and then that was done locally for the theater in the area.
Now, what's this in this case here?
It's a vest and T-shirt worn by Schwarzenegger in Predator. More modern film than the other props. Costumes are really easier to come by than most of the other props. Really,
This
they're
doesn't
more
even look
common.
like Arnold could fit into that thing. It's,
Yeah, it looks surprisingly small, but it's definitely his. And
I see you have a letter of authenticity or
oh
something.
yeah, that's from the costume designer Marilyn Vance Straker. She designed that, and yeah, he certainly did fit into that. We had one of our muscle-bound friends try it on, and he's about the same size as Schwarzenegger, so it fits.
And up above we got the Harold Lloyd board. What is that? You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah, that was used, that again is a marquee display that would have been used outdoors, would have been attached to the marquee for a film called Mad Wednesday that Harold Lloyd was in.
Well, that was his last one, right?
I believe it was, yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't from one of his silent
No,
He was basically
no.
a silent star from
Oh, he
the
was
20s.
he was an enormous silent comedian. People don't realize how popular he was. People remembered Chaplin and Laurel and Hardy, but Harold Lloyd was just a stellar, personality. And once sound came in, he made some entertaining films, but his popularity really waned, and people pretty much forgot about them.
Yeah. You've also got some older movie posters, some
Yeah.
science fiction.
Science fiction and horror. We've got The Amazing Colossal Man, Isle of the Dead with Boris Karloff, Deadly Mantis, and one of the Commando Cody episodes.
That was an old serial, right?
Right, that was a sci-fi serial from, I think, 1952. Kind of neat sci-fi art for that poster.
How do you get those? I know
those-
it's hard to get a lot of the older science
Right.
fiction posters,
Right.
unless you pay a lot of money for them.
Right. Well, that one, the Commando Cody, is kind of a typical, easy to find science fiction poster. Deadly Mantis and The Amazing Colossal Man are a little bit scarcer.
Okay, thanks. Thanks for showing us your collection here. And if anybody wants to see this collection of props and masks, you can stop down at the Avalon Theater. They're on display every day. See the movie and look at the masks.
That's right.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye.